fine, but
Used to be in the Jester with the Kings.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, I had a couple people ask me, I have a little dog. You can see one of the pictures. He's with me. He'll just sit here, he's quiet, but now I'm getting, nobody knows who I am, they just know the dog, the dog that carries him.
We have a lady, she does that. She always carries the dog in her purse. Her terrier.
Yeah.
Its name is Sophie. She just carries her purse, and sometimes people don't even know she's ever there. Sometimes she can help me. She'll see me, she'll take her to the dog around town. Same kind of thing. Where's Sophie?
That's why I walked in there with PJ. What are you doing? Why are you here?
You're the dog carrier, not the actual entertainer.
Exactly. I take him whenever I used to teach these marketing classes, and I was first day I go in, and I didn't have him yet. He's little, he's even cuter than the one I had before. But I always tell everybody, you don't need to take these classes, just go get him a dog. If you can't get in the door, everybody wants to see the dog. Invite you into their office, let them hold the dog, and then they'll what are you doing?
We just had a funny conversation about dog yesterday. Talk about there's this lady on I saw on X that she was complaining that she has a business card for the maid and job. I'm like, let me tell you, she's going to do this subjects in 2 minutes.
worked an hour ago. So, even though the numbers are down a little bit, I always figure the people that need to hear it are here.
There it is.
David solved the problem. Now all I got to do is figure out how to get this back on. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Mythbusters, say that 5 times quickly, Mythbusters Workshop. And we also want to welcome all the people that are online. We are streaming this, so I hope you dress to impress. Our purpose here today is to help dispel some of the misbeliefs and help you determine if you are prepared and able to afford long-term care. This workshop is presented by the Bellevue Heights Foundation. I'm Bob Callan, and I'll be facilitating today. But I want to shout out to Beth Epley, who couldn't be here today, but she did all the legwork. She set all this up. So if you see Beth around church, thank her for putting this event together. Let's open with a word of prayer. Father, thank you for being here. Thank you for blessing us with the resources and the ability to maintain a dignified way of life in what can be a very difficult stage of our lives. Bless each speaker today as they shed light on resources and methods to assist us in living our best life. We thank you in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. So at this time, I would like to introduce the panel. See who we've got here. Joseph Falconbridge from On Care Hospice. We've got Lewis Johnson over here. He's from Senior One Source. Katie Brenneman from Stronghold Financial. And Stephen Hunt with Senior Gaps. Correct? Thank you so much for being here, guys. Each person on the panel will get about 15 minutes to answer some questions that were prepared ahead of time. And then the last 20 minutes or so, depending on how much time we have left, we'll open it to questions from the audience. So be ready for that. So let's get right with it. Would you welcome Joseph Falconbridge?
Well, thank you folks very much. I'm Joseph to a couple folks in my family, but I'm Joe to everybody else. So Just to tell you a little bit about myself, so you know I'm not just some guy who read a book last night at the hotel like the commercials say. I actually come from a very small town in Pennsylvania, grew up in a one-stoplight town, 40 kids in my class, everybody was nice to everybody, and you helped the people that needed help. That's just the way it was. When I went to Penn State to play football, I learned that the world wasn't all like that, but that's still who I am. And so what I do is I'm a hospice educator. I work for the Orchard Point communities, have their own in-house hospice, which is On Care. We will also, in the very near future, have home health as well. It's something that I work with a lot, so I'm going to speak to both, but mainly hospice probably as we go through a lot of these. But if you have questions about either, please, at the end, feel free to ask. I have about 15 years experience in hospice specifically, some in Pennsylvania, but mostly here in Arizona. I've lived here for about 10 years. My mother's a Glendale High School graduate. That's what drew me back, was all the family out here. But like I say, I really am more of an educator. I'm not a salesman. That's not what I'm here to do. So I want to make sure we can kind of spread the word for you folks so that we can exactly dispel these myths. Here's what I heard, here's what my neighbors told me, here's what happened to me and it was bad. Well, maybe that shouldn't have happened. So what we're going to do today is kind of like we were saying, we're going to run through some generalities, some questions that I get a lot when I do these myth-buster type of presentations. And if we don't have time at the end and you have something you'd like to talk to me about specifically, I'm going to be here a little while after as well. So come up to me and come find me. So why don't we go ahead and get it rolling here?
Okay. So the first question to Joe is, what should the general public know when presented with home health or hospice options in a hospital setting?
There we go. That's a really good one. So most of us, let's say we're at the hospital, or when a doctor's in the room talking to you, you assume they're an expert. Assume they know everything about what they're talking about. We assume that if they say to you, we're going to go ahead and sign you up with this hospice today, that's the best hospice for you because that's what the doctor at the hospital said. What you have to understand is there's a lot more to it than just that. You always want to make sure you know you have so many options. You want to ask why. And you're going to hear me say that a lot today. That is the key to all of these. Why? Why are we going with this one? And a lot of times, unfortunately, what we don't know as the general public is that there is only one hospice in Arizona that has a license to sign you up for hospice at the hospital, at your bed at the hospital. And what that does is it makes the case manager's life so much easier because they don't have to plan your transportation, they don't have to do any of that because they'll take care of it. So guess who they're going to send you to? That one. That's the only one they're going to send you to. I'm not going to say who it is. We probably all know who I'm talking about. That's okay. You have so many other options. You can say, well, hold on. Here's what's important to me. I need to know that the nurse is going to come see me at least 2 days a week, that I'm going to know her name and her phone number, and it's going to be that same nurse all the time. Maybe religion is important to you. Maybe you need a very specific chaplain. Maybe you need a rabbi. Well, not every hospice is going to be able to offer you that. But if you ask those questions, they'll point you to the one that can. They're going to point you to the one that's going to feed you and give you what you need and what your family needs as you move forward. But really, the big one here is, again, that why question. Whether it's a hospital setting, whether it's hospice, whether it's home health, ask why are we sending it? Is it because their representative brings you cake every Friday and so you only send it to them? Do some homework, because a lot of times what I like to do is these presentations for folks just like yourselves who are going to get their ducks in a row before we even have to have this. I already know. I've already done my homework. I know what I'd like and who I'd like to work with as we move forward, instead of just being in the heat of the moment where you're thinking my options are very limited, my time is very limited. What am I going to do? You're usually going to sign up for that first one that's right there. It's easier. But that's what you need to know, is you have so many options, and you want to talk to some folks. You want to get an expert in front of you, not just somebody that says, well, I don't know, that's the one they give me. Here. That's not the answer you're looking for, obviously. You want to have something behind it that explains to you, this is the reason we're doing this. It's a caring, compassionate staff. I've had families give me feedback that, boy, this is just one. Those are the answers you're looking for when you ask those why questions. And don't be afraid in the hospitals to ask those questions to your case managers, to the floor nurse. Somebody can answer that question for you. And if they can't, somebody else can come in that room and make sure that you have the right answer. So let's...
Okay, so a follow-up question that you may or may not have already answered, but does hospice mean a family is giving up hope and throwing in the towel?
That's the biggest myth about hospice is as soon as, let's say, someone like me walks in the room and says the word hospice, I might as well be wearing a black hood and carrying a sickle. And that's what people think when they hear that word. And absolutely not true. I never in my life thought I would be standing in front of a group of people talking about hospice. I teach end of life to caregivers because I've worked with quite a few end of life doulas. So I can appreciate that journey and that portion of all of our lives a little bit more. It's not scary when you understand. When you start to put some understanding to it. And to appreciate the fact no one in this room is making it to 300. We're just not. You know, we're all going to get there. We all are going to deal with this part of our life, but to not be scared of it. So when we talk about hospice, what you want to do are these sorts of things. Educate yourself. Educate yourself on what a good hospice should be. That you can be on hospice for quite a good length of time. That hospice is a service not only for the patient, but for the family. It is there to help everyone. There are so many benefits of our nurses, CNAs, music therapy, pet therapy. I see a puppy over here. I have a little dog I carry around most of the time. I almost brought him with me today. But these are the sorts of things that are obviously the scariest when I go in and talk to families, and that's what I do for our communities. When we need to have this conversation and they need to understand and educate, I go in and I try to break down those barriers of being so scared of the service. And so what ends up with most folks is they wait just a little too long to come on to hospice service. So you hear folks that end up, well, we tried and tried and we went out to the hospital. Well, guess the hospital doesn't want any of that stuff to be happening at the hospital. So that's where you hear the folks say, well, we ended up in an inpatient building for a couple of days. And, that's not what hospice is truly all about. Yes, it does happen that way sometimes. But hospice is a wonderful thing. I actually just signed my own grandmother up with our services a couple of weeks ago. I had to educate my own family who looked like deer in the headlights in front of me. I was like, I've been doing this for 15 years. How do you not understand? But now when I go in and I see how happy they all are, Grandma had her hair done by our CNA yesterday, and she was, she's only awake about 2 hours a day now. She was so excited about it. To see my dad, who was really scared about all of this, be able to have a conversation with my nurse to understand and appreciate what's going on. And have the chaplains there and have the social workers. But I think most folks don't understand that hospice isn't all about death. It isn't. It's really about building up the family. It's about bringing everyone closer together in that time and eliminating the fear of what's about to happen. Because again, unfortunately, we're all going to go through this. So, don't be scared of that step, because if you miss it, you're missing out on a lot.
Okay, you touched based earlier on this a little bit, but are all hospice companies the same?
Absolutely not, and I kind of did mention that earlier, and that's in Maricopa County alone, there are 140 hospice agencies. 140. Believe it or not, they finally put an end to adding on to that. They're not giving out any more licenses, and the biggest problem with that is there's a lot of folks that are out there just to make a buck. So there's some of these hospices, it's not illegal for a doctor who has a practice to own his own hospice and refer everyone to that hospice, because guess who's getting paid?
My question would be, what would be the services we should be looking at that should be provided by a hospice?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that for you. All hospices have certain boxes they're going to check. While we're on the topic of is everybody the same? Everybody's going to give you a nurse. Everybody's going to have a CNA come out to see you at least twice a week, but depending on what you need, and a chaplain. But what you need is, maybe you need more than that. Maybe you need a company that's going to send your nurse out 3 times a week. Maybe you don't want a team of nurses. Maybe you want one nurse. You want to ask those questions. How do you handle that? How often is the CNA going to come and see me? Is it going to be twice a week? Because that's all I need. But maybe you need 5 times a week. Those companies are out there too. You want to make sure you lay all of that out. Again, is religion important to you? What religion? Do we want to make sure that we have this specific type of a chaplain? Then we can do that for you. If music is important to you, ask that question. Do you have a music therapist? Because they can write it into your care plan, and that music therapist comes to you a couple times a week to play music, to do what you want, one-on-one. And again, whether it's pets, there are so many other options that are out there, anything you could almost think of. Some companies do make-a-wish type of services. And once you come on service, they talk with families, and maybe you can't get out to your favorite restaurant that you and your wife have always gone to. Well, they'll bring the restaurant to you, bring the staff to you. They'll cook in your kitchen, and they'll set up your restaurant in your living room. You know, they're probably not going, we're not going to Disneyland or anything, but, you know, so most folks, they think, well, you're talking about hospice, they're going to send me to that building over by the Fry's and, you know, I'll be there a couple days and morphine and that'll be the end. But that's not what hospice is.
Oh,
Hospice shouldn't be a setting like a hospital. They do have inpatient. Hospice is meant to be where you call home. Is it in the community? Is it your home? And whether you're getting up and moving around is totally whether you can or not. Is it safe? Then yeah, absolutely. Get up, move around, live your life like you would every day. And this is just going to be in addition to that, an extra layer of coverage.
okay.
If it is an actual hospice building, if you see a Hospice of the Valley sign on the side, it is not a senior living. It is where it is just for hospice. They would just transfer you there. And usually if someone's there, they typically have not as much time. You know, that's going to be real close to end of life when you get to that point. But that's not an option you would really do. That's something that if you were in a hospital setting and things were getting close, they would direct you that way, or maybe your hospice would do that. The hospice I work for, we don't have an inpatient. We're not taking anybody out of their home. We want you to be where you are most comfortable. We just had a gentleman who passed. They lived in California. He proposed to his wife on the beach. He told me he was super cheap, but he took his family every Tuesday for Taco Tuesday. And what he wanted was for when the time came, a candle that smelled like the beach and fresh tacos to be made and sitting on the dresser so it smelled like the beach and tacos in his room. And that's what we did. That's what hospice is. It is not another building with a hospital bed where there are nurses outside. That's not hospice. It can be for the right specific person. It shouldn't be that for everybody.
Okay, so let me ask this follow-up question then. You mentioned a lot of different services. What's the average cost of hospice services?
Absolutely. Hospice is absolutely no cost to anyone in this room. They'll never get a bill for any service whatsoever. It is covered 100% by Medicare. All of the nurses that are going to come to see you, any supplies you may need, continence supplies, those sorts of things, any medical equipment that you might need, a hospital bed, wheelchairs, walkers, oxygen. If you are on hospice and that is part of your diagnosis, all of that's covered 100%. And that is one of the other benefits for family members when we talk about, you know, bringing hospice on board. You don't have to sit and think, well, we have this appointment with this doctor and this copay, and what about that insurance, and we need to call all. No, that's gone now. We're going to take care of all that for you. We are going to manage all that. And again, no bills, not one, not for any reason. And whether you're on hospice for 2 days or whether you're on for a year, never a bill. It's 100% covered. Home health, on the other hand, is going to be more like a doctor. They're going to bill your insurance and there'll be a copay. But hospice specifically is covered 100% by Medicare, and all of us, every American has that benefit. The only thing that might be a little bit of a hiccup is if you're 100% tied to the VA. The VA is in control of your Medicare. They already are. That's how it works. So they have to give you permission for hospice. But other than that, all of us, when you do qualify, can say, yes, I want to do that. You sign up, and it's covered 100%.
Okay, one last truth or myth. Can you only be in hospice for 6 months?
I think I gave it away by saying a year on my last sentence. But no, and that's another one. The 6-month stigma is something that has been stuck to hospice, because if you go to Medicare.gov and look up hospice, the first paragraph is basically going to explain that what Medicare is looking at, obviously, is someone who may have less than 6 months left in their journey. The reason is it's covered 100%. The government doesn't want to just start paying for this for all of us if we can go out and get this care somewhere else. So truly what this is for someone who can't get up and get out to the doctor anymore, doesn't want to go and pursue chemotherapy anymore. It's just not worth it for me. I want to be home. I want to be comfortable. Well, once we can say you qualify, now all of these things that are covered 100% are coming to you. Even if, let's say, someone has a fall and we think, well, boy, they might have a broken hip. Well, if they're on hospice, rather than us send that person to the emergency room, we're going to have a mobile x-ray come to your house. We're going to do the x-ray right here. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go to the hospital when you're on hospice. Again, unfortunately, somebody falls and maybe they hit their head and they're bleeding. Well, you need to go to the hospital. They can't do that at home. But really what hospice truly is when someone gets to the point where the hospice philosophy is, we are not here to cure a disease. We are here to treat all the symptoms, all of them, whatever you need. That doesn't mean we're feeding people full of pain pills. That's not it at all. If you had pain, you need that, then yes, it's there. But it's just whatever everyone needs. And some people even think, well, if I go on hospice and I get a UTI, they won't write me a... That's not true. We're going to fix it. We're going to make you feel as comfortable as you possibly can. And comfortable means something different to everybody. Like I say, my grandmother's on our service. She only gets up a couple times a day, but she really enjoys that time she spends with all the folks, us as family. I was there last night, and she's telling me about the wonderful things that she's experiencing. And for me, I do this every day. I work with these folks every day. But to see it from the family point of view, because when it's your family, it's totally different. It's just really wonderful. It's giving me goosebumps right now to think about, But that's what hospice should be. Hospice should, the folks who when they come in your house, they become family. They give you goosebumps. They care. They're not there to check you off the list and get to the next person. So if you ever run across that, if you're experiencing hospice and that's what you're seeing and you feel like it's wrong, go with your gut instinct, ask some questions, and changing from one hospice to another is as easy as making a phone call. You don't have to do anything besides that. So if you're not happy, find somebody else.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
folks,
Joe.
very much.
Keep in mind that there's going to be a question and answer period at the end, so we want to get through our guests and give everybody a chance. But if you have any more questions about hospice, he's the guy to talk to. So, Lewis Johnson, why don't you come tell everybody who you are, who you work with, and we'll get into some questions.
All right, thank you, Bob. All right, let me lower this a little bit. Everybody hear me okay? Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I love this church. The fact that we're even here doing this, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Pastor Rob. Thank you, Bob. Just being here, the fact that you guys are here, they provide information. Joe said it best. I mean, a lot of this is just education. The fact that you want to do this puts you ahead of the curve. A lot of us on this panel wind up dealing with families in incredible crises that are trying to make really tough decisions with little or no time and little or no information. And oh, by the way, it's a super important decision, probably the last biggest decision you'll make. So thank you for all being here. It's really, really smart of you. And you guys are awesome human beings. As a father of a 30 and 13-year-old, I can tell you that the next generations just are extremely disappointing. So the fact that anytime I can be around you guys, hardworking people that understand how awesome this country is, warms my heart. I love you guys. My name is Lewis Johnson. My wife started a company called Senior One Source in 2013. We're basically realtors for senior housing. Our job is to help people find the best possible options when home is no longer an option. Our primary goal is to bring resources into the home so you guys can stay there as long as you want, or friends or family or your parents or whomever it happens to be. But ultimately, if the other services are needed beyond that, our goal and our hope is to help you get there as easily as possible so that you can receive whatever services are needed and enjoy your lives, because that's what we're all here to do. And that is me. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Lewis. Question for you is, moving into assisted living like going into a nursing home?
That's a great question, because having worked in buildings for a long time, first of all, we have to define what nursing home is. I think a lot of times when people are thinking about going from their home to an assisted living environment or whatever that is, you picture a straight jackets and you picture like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or somebody getting chained or chemically restrained, or a variety of things. In general, nursing home isn't even a real term. It typically applies to skilled nursing facilities, which is short-term stay. So if you might have had friends or, again, family members, so you start in a hospital and you want to go home, and then there's that in-between. That's typically what a skilled nursing facility or rehab facility is, commonly referred to as a nursing home. But that's not what an assisted living environment is. For the most part, there's always good and bad ones, and that's why people like me exist. And we know, for those of you who have toured some in this area, you've got more than, you throw a stick and you can hit 5 from this exact spot. But the nice thing is a lot of people will refer to them as like a cruise ship on land, and there's some that are super nice like that. You know, as we know, and some of the panelists here will help you, money dictates all. The more you have, the more options you have. But that doesn't mean for a reasonable amount you can't have a really nice environment. You can have like a resort style type place. When you look at assisted living or independent living or anything like that, it's very similar to having an apartment with a lot of benefits or an apartment with whatever services are needed. You're free to do whatever you want. You're not constrained. You can go enjoy the benefits of, activities. They'll take you to different places. They'll take you to ball games. They'll do different things. Whatever it is you guys collectively like, they can help you with that, or they'll take you to those places. So the idea is just to have fun and just to receive the services that you need. So no, it is not like a nursing home is not the same thing.
So
But
if
it
I
is
move,
scary.
if I move into one of these places, Louis, do I lose my independence?
Love that question. It's a lot of times we feel like we have to give up what we've had in order to make this transition, right? Like, okay, so if I move into assisted living, then I don't get to do whatever it is that I want, that I'm constrained, or people are going to tell me what to do, and I have to, everybody marches down to the cafeteria at the same time, and we march home and at the same time, and that's not what it's for. You actually, when you're at home, you have to figure out all this stuff. You have to make sure if the fridge is broke, you call the guy that's going to fix the fridge, and if he doesn't show up or he shows up 5 hours later, you have to handle all of that. When you're in assisted living or independent living, you just call the concierge, they handle it, you go on about your business. So in a lot of ways, you gain independence because you're not constrained by having to do as much stuff. You write one check that pays for your rent. Anytime you need help, you can call somebody, they'll help you. Whatever that looks like, whatever it is. They'll even change your light bulbs. They'll do all the cleaning for you. They do all the cooking for you. You go do what you want to do. You don't have to do the things that you have to do. Cook, clean, fix stuff. You don't have to mess with any of that. They'll do it. Go do the stuff you want to do. If you want to play Mahjong, go play Mahjong. You want to play Pinochle, play Pinochle. If you want to play bingo, my wife and I like playing bingo, go do that. You can do those things instead of having to worry about all the trivial stuff on a day-to-day basis. So it's not losing, but gaining. You can have your car. You can do whatever you want. Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. There's a lot of ways to fund this, and it just depends on the building, right? There's some places out there that will take state aid. We're going to have, Carrie's going to be speaking on that next, actually. So there's ways to do it. It just depends on the building, but there are plenty of options no matter where you are in the income spectrum, right? So you can have zero money, you can have a ton of money. There's always a place. That's why people like me exist, to help find the best place given the situation, both physically and financially.
So you're saying I don't have to sell my home to move in?
You don't have to sell your home to move in. Thank you, Bob. And try and keep in mind, too, assisted living, like when people make that decision, or if you medically need that, it's not the state regulation specifically says it's a 30-day notice. So it's not like if you move in, you're there, and I'm there and I'm stuck forever. I'm stuck there. I'm just going to go to this warehouse until I pass, and, well, that's my life now. It's not the case. Just like Joe was saying with hospice, if you don't like it, you don't have to stay there. We have a lot of people that'll move into a place and keep their house, okay, until they feel comfortable that that's what they want to do or that's where they want to be, and then they can figure out what they want to do at their house. There is no, this is the way it has to be kind of situation. The myth-busting part of this is that if a lot of times people feel like, hey, I'm at this point in my life, this is where it's going to be, it sucks, and here I go. I'm off to the warehouse. It doesn't have to be that way. There's so much that you can do and so many different ways that you can do it, that you can enjoy and be around your friends, still come to church, enjoy the life you've always enjoyed, and in some ways in a lot more freeing and independent way. And that can include keeping your house until you're comfortable with it. And again, we have two other people on here that will talk some more about the funding piece of it so that you can keep that house, especially if you have a spouse, or maybe if you don't, there's other ways that you can work around that as well. Thank you.
So just to be clear then, you touched on this a little bit about the independence. if I'm in a facility, can I go out for a day if I want to go do something? Can I go visit family for a few hours? Do I have to get permission?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to run one of these buildings, and I always told people that I was the head butler, okay? It's your house. It's your mansion. Your apartment is your bedroom, okay? But the mansion is yours. If it's fair and it's reasonable and ethical, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. That's our job, okay? You have butlers, maids, chauffeurs. Their job is to give you what you want. So yes, if you want to go somewhere, you just let them know, primarily because of medication. If you want to skip out and not tell them, you can, but if there's an emergency, that's not very fair. It's your staff. Treat them right. But you can do whatever it is you want. So anytime you want to leave, you just, let them know you can go where you want. A lot of times there's medication involved, so they'll make sure that you have your medication with you so that you can go out and do so in a safe manner. But yeah, you can go visit your family. You can take overnight trips. You can take week-long trips. You can go on cruises. Anything you do today, you can do there as well. So yeah, you can come and go as you please.
So for those of us that are married, if one of the spouses goes into a facility, can the other spouse move in with them, or is there restrictions in that regard?
There are no restrictions, and it's whatever you as a spouse wants, because some spouses do not ever want to be left. I do not want to be away from my wife. And I'll pull back the screen on this a little bit. Okay, so when the time comes, we're going to go to a senior living community because she wants to, okay? Not because I want to. And that's the truth, okay? I love helping people find places, but I'm the kind of person that when I get home, I just want to be by myself. I just want to hide out from the world. She is the most social person on the planet. She's super beautiful. She's super fun. So as a married person, when that time comes, I will be joining my wife wherever, however she wants it, because I love her, and that's just the truth. So as it applies to those of us who are married, yes, if you have a spouse who has a lot of care needs and you wanted someone to provide that for you, you can go in with them. They'll charge you a second person fee. It's much smaller. You can be there with them is forever, figuratively speaking, or until we get called home to the Lord. But you can be there with them. If that's what you want, you can do that. You can also stay at home and come visit them. It's really what you want. Everything about these buildings and everything about what the panel's telling you is so you guys can live your life on your terms, your way. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and if you do need physical help, you're going to have to be willing to accept that, because the hardest part of our job is just letting people know that it's okay to accept help. The best part about you guys is that you're tough. The greatest weaknesses you have sometimes is because you're tough, right? Too tough for your own good to accept that help. So as a married couple, sometimes, if you need that to stay together, do it, and if you don't want to, it's okay too. We can work it out so that you guys as couples can feel good about what that looks like when the time comes, and if.
Thanks, Lewis. I appreciate that. So jot down any questions, because if you have any more questions about placement, Lewis is the guy to talk to at the end here.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Lewis. So I'm going to call forward Katie Brenneman, and she is going to talk from a different angle.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having us all here today. So as Bob said, my name is Katie Brenneman. I am one of the founders of Stronghold Financial. We specialize in long-term care financial planning across the board. So we work a lot with people who want to plan ahead, get out in front of this, and have more options if and when the time comes. But unfortunately, most people don't plan ahead. And so the bulk of what we do really is crisis, I won't call it planning, crisis responding, where someone is, in long-term care already, potentially getting ready to run out of funds, as the woman in the back there was asking about. We have a lot of clients who are just approaching the situation where they or their spouse need to move into the long-term care community. And in situations like that, we do a lot of planning with the state's long-term care program to help reduce the out-of-pocket care costs for the individual, the healthy spouse who's maybe still living at home, and that sort of thing.
So you're helping people finance long-term care. How are 3 ways that you can set that up? What are 3 ways to pay? Yeah,
so the 3 ways to pay for long-term care are, 1, long-term care insurance, which most people, quite frankly, don't have anymore. If they do have it, we find that they're very underinsured. the rates on long-term care insurance got astronomical over the last 10, 15 years. And so people had to drop policies or they had to pare back their coverage in order to be able to afford their premiums. And most people just never purchased the insurance coverage in the first place. And at the point in time that you need it, it's too late. The insurance company says, you're too high of a risk, we're not going to cover you. It's kind of like asking the car insurance company for coverage after you had the accident. And so long-term care coverage is really something that we just don't see frequently anymore. The second way is to private pay, just spend your own income and your own assets towards your cost of care. The concern there is it's gotten really expensive, and you don't know how long you're going to need the care for. We don't have that crystal ball to know how long you'll be in that situation. And so it's hard to tell on the front end if you can really afford it. If you're the healthy spouse at home, it could be really terrifying. You want your spouse to have the care that they need and deserve for the rest of their life, no matter how long they need it, no matter how expensive that care ever becomes. But on the flip side, you want to know that you're going to be okay for the rest of your life too. And so it can be scary feeling like you're writing kind of a blank check or a check for an unknown period of time. And so most people are hesitant to go out and get the care that they need or deserve because they're scared about the financial implications of that. And then the third way to pay for care is Medicaid. I want to stress this is not Medicare. It is a rude awakening for a lot of people when the time comes, if and when the time comes to move into assisted living, that Medicare does not pay for that. So Medicare is meant to cover rehabilitative stays at skilled nursing facilities, like Lewis was talking about, after a hospitalization before you are ideally going back home or going to an assisted living home or community if you can't go back home. But Medicare does not cover long-term care. So Medicaid is the program that we're talking about here today. And most people look at the Medicaid program and they say, well, I have way too much income or way too many assets to ever qualify for that. And so that's not an option for me. I'm going to have to spend down all of my life savings before I would actually be able to leverage that program. And that actually is one of the myths that I'm hoping to bust for you all this morning.
Okay, ALTCS, what is that?
Yeah, so the Arizona Medicaid Program for Long-Term Care is an acronym. It's ALTCS, ALTCS. So it stands for Arizona Long-Term Care System. And it is a subdivision of Arizona Medicaid. Most people hear Medicaid and they think of health insurance for individuals that meet financial requirements. But most people aren't aware that all 50 states have a long-term care program that's a subdivision of the state's Medicaid department. And because it is a government benefit, and so you do need to be found eligible for the benefit. And so the way that the state determines eligibility is through a couple of methods. They look at medical eligibility, and they also look at financial eligibility for the program. And you need to be found eligible on both fronts, not either or. So if you have no assets and really low income, but you're not medically eligible for the program yet, you're declined. You have to be medically and financially eligible at the same time in order to be approved. And the value that it provides is life-changing, honestly, you guys. The Arizona program actually covers home care as well, so you don't have to move into an assisted living community in order to benefit from the program. You could remain in your own home, and the state will provide care for up to 40 hours a week. So when you think about the private pay rate for home care these days being somewhere between $30 to $40 an hour, it's gotten really expensive. If you do the math on that and think about the state paying for 40 hours a week of care for you, it's almost $70,000 a year. So it's a tremendous value. If you have to move into an assisted living home or community, a memory care community, a skilled nursing facility at some point in time, the program provides coverage there as well. And it works a little differently if you're married or unmarried, but just high level, the program's going to eliminate the gap between your income and your cost of care. When I say income, I'm talking about Social Security, pensions, things like that, not taking distributions from investment accounts or retirement accounts, truly the income sources that you receive. So if your Social Security or your pension is $2,000 a month, let's say, and your cost of care is $6,000 a month, then the state's eliminating that $4,000 a month gap for you. So again, tens of thousands of dollars a month of coverage.
Can you put it in a percentage in terms
Tens
of
of thousands of dollars a year of coverage, sorry.
Okay. I'm just wondering how much of that does Alltech cover? I mean, when we're talking long-term care,
Yeah.
do you have a percentage of what Alltech will cover, or roughly?
Well, again, it's going to be different depending. I mean, if someone has Social Security and pensions amounting to $4,000 a month and their cost of care is $6,000 a month, and the state's eliminating a $2,000 a month gap for them, that's obviously a lot different than someone who has $1,000 a month of Social Security, and in their case, the state's eliminating the $5,000 a month gap for them. Also, if there's a married couple, the state looks at the healthy spouse who's at home still and says, well, you're entitled to a certain minimum amount of income in order to maintain your lifestyle. And so if your income alone doesn't meet that minimum threshold, then we're actually going to cover even more of the cost so that you can keep more of the combined marital income and make sure you can still pay your bills at home. So it is unfortunately pretty varying in every situation depending on the unique moving parts.
One of the problems that a lot of people think, anyway, is that they have to spend down income in order to qualify for some of these programs.
Yeah.
What's the truth about spending down?
Yeah, assets is actually, I mean, some people do think that they have too much income from Social Security and pensions. Just know that there's really no such thing as having too much income or too many assets to qualify for the program. So if you are over this income cap that the state lays out for you, you need to work with a professional who knows what to do, but you can get around that hurdle, if you will, and qualify for the program anyway. Bob's talking about assets as well. So a lot of people think I have way too many assets. And again, that number of assets is different depending on if you're married, if you're unmarried. So it's hard to get into specifics of what that figure is that you think you need to spend down to. But just know that if you have more money than that threshold that the state tells you, again, there are ways to actually work with a professional and protect assets so you don't have to spend them down in order to qualify for this benefit. We are working with a married couple right now, for an example. They're in their 70s. The wife had a stroke, unfortunately. She's in a skilled nursing facility right now, and her medical coverage, her Medicare's ended. Again, Medicare doesn't cover forever, right? So her coverage through Medicare ended, and she's on a ventilator still. And her cost of care at that skilled nursing facility is $25,000 a month being on the ventilator. So even though she and her husband have saved up about $1.5 million of retirement accounts and investment accounts and things of that nature, if you start thinking about spending $25,000 a month for an unknown period of time, you can blow through that real fast. And what happens at that point? So we are actually protecting all $1.5 million for the husband, the healthy spouse who lives in an independent living community, and qualifying his wife for the state's long-term care program, for the Alltech's program. And her monthly out-of-pocket cost when she's on the program is going to be about $2,500 a month. So she just went from $25,000 a month down to $2,500 a month. And even though the state would have told them to spend $1.4 million of their assets, we're protecting all $1.5 million of it for the healthy spouse at home.
Great, that's good news. So this may be a no-brainer, but when's the proper time to start saving financially for long-term care?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah. We were talking before all of this about different situations, and unfortunately, most people don't plan ahead. So the bulk of what we do really is crisis responding. You don't have nearly as many options. We can always still do something, but you don't have as many options. So maybe if you wait until crisis, you've got options A and B, or maybe only A. If you planned ahead, you've got options A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And you might like G best, but if you don't plan as soon as possible, G might not be on the table. So I always recommend, the odds aren't in any of our favor, unfortunately. 4 out of 5 people 65 and up in the US are going to need long-term care at some point in their lives. We don't know if we're the 4 out of 5 or the lucky 1 out of 5, right? So the odds aren't in any of our favor, and every single one of us really needs to have a plan to make sure that if we are the 4 out of 5, that things are happening the way that we want them to, rather than us just being stuck with that one option over there that's not really our favorite.
Okay. Any other financial questions? We'll get back to Katie after the fact, but I think it's great news that you don't have to spend down and go broke in order to get help. So, Steve. We've got Steve Hunt here, and he's going to finish.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all for having me. I own a company called Golden Age Property Solutions, or GAPS for short, and what we do is we help seniors afford long-term care through creative property solutions. There's more than one way to sell a property. You don't have to just go through a realtor. There's actually a lot of additional solutions that are out there that can help maximize your equity that's in your property and help you afford long-term care for a longer period of time. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to maximize the equity in our seniors' houses, so that way they can last in their communities for the long term and not have to worry about running out of funds.
Great. So we'll stop for a musical interlude here. So, Steve, how much equity can be saved with creative solutions?
Yeah, so who remembers when houses were $70,000, $80,000 and not on average $500,000 in the state of Arizona? A lot of people do, and a lot of the seniors that we work with purchased their houses back in those days as well. So when considering how much money you're going to be taking home from selling your property, you have to consider a lot of different aspects. That can be capital gains, which is 15%. A lot of people don't consider that. We have our realtor costs that come into play. There's a lot of ancillary fees that nobody talks about, and that can eat up 40 to 50% of your equity that's in your property. So if you have a $500,000 house, just by all these fees, now you're walking away with $250,000 if you sell just through a realtor and don't take a whole look at that scope and that picture. So if we could save an additional $250,000, that could afford us how much more care for how much longer?
You're mentioning houses, but are there other properties that you can help with?
Absolutely. So we don't say no to any properties. We've had properties that are 55 plus manufactured homes that are considered a CAR because it's on a leased parcel of land. We've had properties that have come to us that are 10,000 square foot houses up in North Scottsdale. So there's really no stopping what we're able to help out with. We just want to take a look at the overall value and how much we can maximize from that to help you afford long-term care.
Okay. What does your average client look like? What's your typical client look like?
Similar to what Katie was saying, it's usually a crisis situation is when we're getting called in. Mom fell and she's in the hospital. She doesn't have the money to switch to a new community or go to a SNF, so she's stuck at the hospital or just transitioning to the next place of care. So in those situations, we're trying to make sure that they get care as quickly as possible. And what we do there is we actually provide down payment assistance. So we'll cut a check for $10,000, $20,000 so you can leave and go to the community or the skilled nursing facility that you need to go to right then and there. And then we actually purchase the house on the back end from you. That way everything's handled for you from point A to point B. We make sure we're setting up estate sale companies, we're setting up any kind of services that you possibly might need so that there's no stress about selling your property and you can just move from point A to point B.
Okay. What's the time frame from start to finish when a client works with you?
So working with us is a little bit more unique than working with a realtor. We work with realtors as well, if that makes the most sense, and they'll cut their commissions. But you have to list a property on the market. You have to wait for buyers to come and look at the property. You might have to fix some things up within that property as well to get it sold on the market. When you work directly with us, we've closed on properties as fast as 4 days. So when you're given potentially diagnosis or if a crisis does happen, we're able to move extremely fast. So we've been able to close properties as fast as 4 days to get the cash in hand to the families that need it.
Great. All right. So other resources that you provide? What else do you do?
Yeah, so we try to help out with every aspect of this. That's partnering up with all of the great people on the panel up here too. So working together with people like Katie, Lewis, Joe, so we can make sure, okay, do we have everything that you possibly need? We don't want to just get you cash in hand just for the pain that you're in right now. We want to make sure this lasts over the long term and that we're planning accordingly and that we're just maximizing that equity, because that can really afford you so much more care over the long term. We've had situations where we're able to give over market value offers, and we pay on a monthly basis to the seniors that we're working with to $3,000, $4,000 a month for their property. That way it's covering the cost of care for them. They don't have to deal with the capital gains. They don't have to deal with the realtor fees because we're transacting that directly. We're saving them just a pile of money on that side of it.
Okay. I'm greatly encouraged listening to all these people because they're all talking about solutions rather than just the problems. So I think what we might do, we're a little ahead of the game, but why not? Let's get the mic out and open it up to some questions from the audience. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So if you have a question, David's got the microphone back there, and it'll be easier if everybody can hear the question.
I can speak loud. In reference to everything that all four of you discussed, is it necessary that we be a resident of the state of Arizona?
Well, good question.
No. The idea is to get information, whether you're a resident or not, so you can plan accordingly for whatever that looks like. You can ask all the questions, we'll all answer them to the best of our abilities. Now, a lot of stuff is state dependent, state regulated, depending on what those things are. We can tell you what that looks like in Arizona, but all of us on this panel can also tell you what that looks like in other states or find that information for you as well.
Yeah, because I was particularly interested in the ALTCS program that you mentioned, and that sounded like a resident-only kind of thing.
Yeah, great question. So ALTCS is specific to Arizona, but all 50 states have a comparable program. They work differently in all 50 states. So if Arizona is not your home base, your true residence, then it can make sense to do the planning in your home state instead. We also see situations where people have the incident occur in Arizona and they can't get back home. And so they end up being here for receiving long-term care, and then we would be reverting back to the Altex program.
Thank you.
Hi. Okay, the gentleman on the end, you said you can close a home in 4 days.
We've closed on homes as fast as 4 days. I don't try to market that because that was an extremely stressful time. On average, it's usually about 2 weeks, but we've gone as fast as we need to.
Is that a close or a sale? I am a realtor.
Yeah, that's a close. So we actually open up contract. We work directly with title and escrow, and we close on the property. So we got the call on a Monday, got it under contract on a Tuesday, closed by Friday, and had mom out of the hospital and into her next community.
So you're saying the property has already sold and then you're doing a close?
Well, we actually are the ones purchasing the property, our
You
business.
are,
So
okay.
that way we don't have to worry about waiting for another buyer or somebody else to come through. We get to control that entire situation by being the one that purchases it.
And you also said that sometimes there could be 50% fees in selling a home. What are those 50% fees?
Up to 50% for the fees. So that can be the capital gains. This is obviously a worst case scenario here, but we have things like capital gains that come into play. We have our agent commissions that come into play. We have, sometimes it's going to be seller concessions, closing costs, fixing up some of the things in the properties. I would say 90% of the properties that I go to, as somebody's health starts to decline, we start to see the property decline as well. If the window breaks, we're not going to go fix the window. If there's a little bit of flooding in the property, we're not going to go fix the flooding. We're just going to deal with it because we don't have the money to deal with it right now.
I have one more question for Louis. In your facilities, you said that people can leave, but there are some facilities where you cannot. Is that true?
If you're in a memory, that is a very, per state regulation, no, that's not true. But there's common sense applications to all this. So if somebody's in a memory care facility, for example, then if they don't have anybody that can take them out, they're not going to go anywhere. So, but unfortunately, if you live in if someone is in that situation, per fire code, if they push on a door long enough, they're going to take off. But to your question is, they cannot stop anyone from leaving, but there are, in memory care, that's a directed level of care, that's a different environment. But for assisted living, no, you can leave whenever you want, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Not that I would recommend it. I do want to add, too, for Stevens Services, because we work with families that need money super quick, and I've used people like Stephen before. That can be huge, because if you're going from needing, you're in skilled nursing or hospital and you have to have a place to go right away and you have no money, these people don't want to provide care for free. So I've used those services in emergency situations. It's not always ideal, but it's very helpful when needed.
Okay.
Concerning the hospice care at home, you said that, you know, they didn't have to go out to a building or whatever, but what about a person that is not able to care for themselves and they have no family or anyone? What would you do in a situation like that?
In a situation like that, hospice obviously isn't going to provide 24/7 care. So if it's not safe for someone to be in their home, they would definitely need to be in another setting, which really kind of opens the door now to everyone sitting up here. Because if we were talking about, again, a lot of times, and I'm blessed because of my position, I work in communities where folks have moved in, and there is a little more pre-planning involved. But in most of my career in hospice, I worked with folks who live in their own home. And a lot of times, as these folks are saying, we're in crisis mode. This is happening right now. I should have made this decision yesterday. So if you're specifically talking about someone who lives by themselves, independently, in their home, in their apartment, what's going to happen is, as a hospice, our social workers are going to step in and help immediately to make connections with someone like Lewis first and foremost, to find out where can we go? What is the best setting? What is the best fit for you? What makes the most sense cost-wise? Now we start getting folks like these guys involved. Do we need to look at Altex? Do we need to sell the home? There's a lot involved. But that's why, again, why we're all here is now you know that. Now you know, boy, I really should get my ducks in a row before I'm sitting at Boswell Rehab and they're telling me my insurance is done paying and now you have to go, but you can't go home. And people hear that all the time. And if, unfortunately, you don't have a large support system here to say, well, come to our house for a little while, we'll figure it out, or, you know, not everybody has those choices. I'm a single dad. I hope my kids will take me in when the time comes. But, you know, I don't know that. I may be in that boat. But, again, that's why we're all here. You couldn't safely stay in your own home with no one besides hospice on board, because hospice is only going to be there a couple hours a day. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So if you're in skilled nursing, can you still have hospice?
That's a very good question. The answer to the first answer to that is no. And the reason why is because when you come onto hospice service, hospice is going to, basically Medicare, as far as we look at it, is a pie. There's that hospice is going to now take the payment from A. That is your doctors, your hospitals, your skilled nursing, physical therapists, they all bill Medicare A. So again, one of the myths is people think you come onto hospice, well, now I can't do all of those things. You can. You can say, I want to rescind my hospice services, no problem. Now Medicare is going to let these other folks pay for that. There are situations where families who are on hospice want to specifically go to, say, a physical therapist, a speech therapist, or not very often skilled nursing would be in here, but in that case, you'd either have to make the choice to remove the hospice services. If you were going to skilled nursing, it would make sense. But again, we're getting very specific, but if you needed skilled nursing while you were on hospice, we have another section called general inpatient, where you still are on hospice, we're paying for it. It's a very specific area. But you can also pay privately. So we have some folks who are on hospice and they want to pursue physical therapy. Medicare's not going to go for that. If you can pursue physical therapy, you can probably go to your doctor. But some families still want to take that route, and even though they've been approved for hospice, so now Medicare won't pay for that, they just pay out of pocket for those therapy services. But again, it's a little, when you start getting into those real specifics, it depends on your situation. But here's where you want to make sure you've got the hospice company that's going to answer your question. They're going to answer the phone when you call, and they're going to give you the right person to get that question answered.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there?
I want to add to that too. Any one of us here can give you general information on any one of these topics. That is, you're right. Just ask us. If you feel connected to any one of us, pull us aside and say, hey, here I am at my baseline. What does this look like going forward? What do you think I would need? What is your professional opinion? We'll all do it for free. We are happy. An ounce of prevention, right? Same thing. My wife said it. We were debating who actually said this. But if there is no plan in place, there's no plan to follow. We want to defuse the bomb before it explodes. We are all experts in picking up the pieces. We'd rather prevent that ahead of time. So yes. Whomever you feel most connected with. I'm selfish. I'm going to say it's me. But these are all sharp people.
So you all can answer the question for financial responsibilities and how much you could qualify for.
Right. So if it's I would. It depends on what you want. So if you want to ask her financial questions, yes. If you want to talk about the value of your home and what that looks like, yes. If you want to talk about hospice, those kinds of things, my specialty is, okay, here's how much it's going to cost if you need X, Y, or Z. So if you need memory care, assisted living homes, a potential short-term skilled nursing, those kinds of things, that's my specialty.
And at the same time, we are all a great reference. We've all been here in this area doing this for quite some time. So if you come to me and you feel comfortable, there's a connection to come and ask me these questions, come and ask me the questions. If it's not something I do, guarantee you I can point you to somebody who does it, who's an expert, who I trust, who I would let my family work with. And for me, that's what it comes down to. Again, it's working with people you trust and knowing that you're getting what you deserve. All of these folks up here, I'd send my own mother to work with any of them. But, all of these things that we're talking about today, they're just like everything else. It's just like finding a mechanic. Some of them are good and some of them aren't in it for the right reason. So make sure you know who you're working with. Ask the questions. And again, why? You want to hear a good reason, no matter whether it's selling your house or, signing up for All-Tex or Lewis telling you, Orchard Point's the place to go. Well, of course it is, because then you can work with me. But you want to make sure you know why, and it's a good reason. But to answer your question, I can't tell you when to sign up for All-Tex, but I know she can, and I can get you connected with her.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
To add to that, I would actually say none of the four of us are the first person that you need to talk to. You all need to make sure that you have your basic legal work done by an estate planning or elder law attorney, not printed off of LegalZoom, not the Attorney General's free documents that are online. A lot of times those documents don't work the way that you think they're going to work when the time comes. And I can't tell you guys how many families I work with where the individual doesn't have power of attorney documents in place. And if you don't have those power of attorney documents in place, prepared properly, then none of us can do the things that we shared with you today. So that's really the first most important place for every single one of you to start. If you haven't had them updated in the last 3 years, I would say get back with the attorney and just see if there are any updates that need to be made to those as well.
Outside of the power of attorney situation, is there anything else that we should be thinking about doing now before we need that care that would make an easier transition for the spouse?
I think other people have things to say as well. I would say a few tips. We often see that spouses or kids don't know where the legal documents are. They don't know anything about their loved one's financial situation. I've seen spouses included who have not had anything to do with the finances their entire lives, and I get it. But it leaves you in a really challenging position when crisis hits and you're all of a sudden thrown into that role. So just making sure that both spouses know where to find financial information. They know account logins, passwords. Your children know. They know where to find the documents, how to access your information if needed, is something that is going to make everyone's life a lot easier if and when the time comes.
She said it best. Go to an elder law attorney and get a trust put in place, okay? I talked to my parents 12 years ago, and I said, hey, what do you guys, being in this business, when this time comes, Mom and Dad, what do you want me to do? So my mom says, well, if it gets that bad, Louis, just take me out behind the barn and shoot me. And I said, okay, Mom, I'm obviously not going to do that. I kid you not, her response was, well, then hire someone. Okay, Mom, I'm not going to do that. So 10 years later, my wife and I get our trust set up because in the trust, you can explain everything in detail, who's going to make those decisions for those health care needs. All that needs to be laid out. It can be, you know, your spouse first and then a child or whomever you want. So I would recommend going to an elder law attorney and establishing those. And also really talk to your spouse and your loved ones about every possible scenario that you can think of. My wife and I talk nonstop, because we're sickos, but we talk nonstop about if this happens, Louis, this is what I want. We have a difference in our end of life scenario. So if I'm incapacitated, for example, and the doctor gives me a 50% chance of coming out of a coma, I want that fighting chance, okay? She doesn't want that fighting chance, but we've had that discussion. And because of that, in the trust, I get to make those decisions for her and vice versa.
If I can add another piece to that. So tonight I'm meeting with my mom and dad, and my dad said the same thing. And he's recently getting a diagnosis of dementia. And so they finally, after years and years, have accepted for me to meet with them. So pray for me for tonight. But we had a family who had, of course, the house that was in the name of the mom and the dad. And the mom ended up with dementia. And when he went to sell the house so that he could pay for her care, he couldn't sell it because she was already deemed incompetent. And it was a very difficult situation because what he didn't have was the mental health care power of attorney. And we miss that. And even with our professionals, a lot of times, we miss that. And so I'm so glad that that got brought up today because you always want to make sure that you've got the medical and the mental health care power of attorney to cover all aspects. But thank you guys because you're doing an amazing job.
How many of you in here, your primary residence is out of state? Okay. So it's going to make the most sense for you to have your legal work done by an attorney in your home state. However, you can reach out to me. My materials are out on the table out front. I can refer you to an attorney here in town if needed who can help you with the mental health care power of attorney specifically. Arizona is one of only 2 states, I believe, unless that's changed, that requires a mental health care power of attorney in addition to financial and medical. So again, if something unexpected happens to you when you're here in Arizona and you don't have that mental health care power of attorney because Wisconsin doesn't require it, then you're missing a document that could be imperative for you to have for that crisis situation here in Arizona. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a great additional point.
I have a question about a trust or a will. Would you explain the difference between the two?
I am not an attorney. That's my disclaimer. And I would always recommend that you consult with one to talk about whether or not a trust or a will is appropriate in your unique situation. A trust is going to, so a trust and a will both outline where you want your assets to go upon your passing. A trust can get a lot more detailed than a will. So if you have a lot of moving parts, maybe a blended family, a trust is probably going to be more applicable to you. There are also certain thresholds where if your estate, when you pass away, is over X amount of money, then the will is going to go through the probate court in order to distribute your assets. You're inviting the court into your assets getting to your loved ones where you wanted them to go. I wouldn't personally want that for myself. It's time consuming and it's an expensive process. But with that being said, I have seen a lot of situations as well where trusts are not really needed and you can accomplish the same end result of what a trust would accomplish without it, without incurring the cost, without incurring issues that trusts can create when it comes time to go to qualify for the Altex program. So again, I would just recommend that you work with an estate planning or elder law attorney specifically in your home state so that you know which of the tools is most appropriate for you.
Great questions. Anything else from anyone?
When and why would you go and stay in a hospice facility?
That's a really good question. Typically, most folks who are going to end up in a hospice facility, the what we would call an inpatient unit, a hospice inpatient unit, 90% of the time, those are folks who have put off hospice, who have ended up at the hospital, and the hospital looks at what is happening and says, you know, they're going to probably pass in the next week. Or we may have hours, days. Medicare it's a very big no-no for the hospitals to let someone pass away in the hospital. They don't want that to happen there. So what's going to happen there is here is where you have your Hospice of the Valley contract to be able to take someone in bedside. And they would transport you to one of their inpatient units. Inpatient units are not intended for someone to be there for 3 months. That is not the purpose of an inpatient. Inpatient also may help to alleviate, like the question earlier, if there isn't a safe place to go, there isn't a lot of family, there isn't, you know, this person has very little options, they may end up at that inpatient unit just because it makes a lot more sense than being at home alone. And again, if that window is unfortunately smaller and someone hasn't signed up for hospice in a timely manner, or maybe, unfortunately, maybe there was an accident, maybe, you know, it was one of those things that caused something to, you know, all of a sudden we have such limited time. But that's going to be typically who's going to be the person that would be in an inpatient type of a setup.
Okay, my mom passed away 26 years ago.
Okay.
And from what I understand, she went to hospice. She was not in the hospital. She went to hospice, and she could only stay there for like a week.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is not the intent of an inpatient, is for someone to be there for any length of time. Inpatient hospice is not skilled nursing. So you're just there because, again, they're thinking, you know, when our professionals look at this, that window of time is less than 7 days. And again,
Okay.
if you hit that 7-day mark, good chance that they're moving you again. And the last thing you want to do to any of us when we get to that age, especially if, you know, we've reached the end of our journey, is to be moving and constantly being on a stretcher and here and here and here. You want to be where you're most comfortable. And so that's why, again, if we pre-plan this, we all know ahead of time in the trust, in the will, where is that? When is that? How is that going to look before we have to know that?
Thank you.
I'm an RN and I've run inpatient. I'm an RN and I've run it. I'm an RN and I've run an inpatient hospice. So it's also for uncontrolled symptoms. It could be pain. So it doesn't have to be close. It could be someone who maybe has months, a year. But if it's uncontrolled at home, a hospice inpatient will take them to control that pain. And it's paid for. So that can be a temporary thing of days or a week. Usually it's controlled within days, and then they're back home. But it's very important to be comfortable in the pain situation.
And that's absolutely true. And that's a situation we don't run across very often, but when it does come up, and in a situation with us where we don't have an inpatient building that belongs to us, here's where we had talked about a skilled nursing doing what we call a general inpatient, what we call a GIP stay. And that's exactly what that's made for. But hospice is intended to try to relieve these things where you are before we start taking someone to an inpatient. But she's absolutely right. If things get way too out of control, pain management wise, or something in that situation, that could absolutely get you to a stay at an inpatient.
Okay, have we got any more questions out there? Is this a wonderful panel or what? They're going to be around for a few minutes, I think, right, in case there's any other questions that may come up. But what a great panel, giving us solutions, not, no mythology, the real deal. So if you have any of these areas of expertise that you want to mine a little bit, talk to these folks. They're obviously very knowledgeable. So thank you again very much for coming. All right.
Time to mingle, I suppose.
Thanks, Louis. Good job there. Yeah.
Here you are, sir. That one belongs to you.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. No, I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
that was great.